Thank you, Russ, and welcome everyone. My name is Michelle Barnett, and I'm the president of the Jacksonville Bar Association in Jacksonville, Florida. I have the pleasure, if you want to call it this year, of leading the Jacksonville Bar, which is in the largest city geographically in the country. As you might expect, there are unique challenges to leading a bar association that is so geographically spread out. And so I've been very excited about the topic of today. Now more than ever, lawyers are essential. Just to give you all an overview of what to expect, we have two great speakers today, panelists, Robert Tobey and Joe Gross. Robert is the president of the Dallas Bar Association, and Joe is the president of the Cleveland Bar Association. We're going to hear from both of them individually about their experiences leading their bars through this process and given their respective sizes. And then we're going to move into some polling questions where we hope and would encourage all of you to participate in the polling questions, which will hopefully provide some opportunity to generate some additional discussion. At the end of both of their presentations, we're going to have a few minutes of a roundtable. I've got a few questions for both of them, and I suspect some of the audience might have questions for both of them. And so the goal of today is to learn from each other, have an opportunity to connect. Moving into our speakers, we're going to start with Robert. He's been involved in bar leadership for a really long time at all levels, and we're excited to have him today. Robert, I'm going to let you take over and tell us about your experience, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Michelle, and thanks, Joe. I think this is going to be a great program, and it's probably going to be a little bit cathartic for me just to be able to talk about the things that we've done this year. A lot of the past presidents have told me there's the year you plan for and then the year you get. And a bunch of them have said there's never been a year quite like this one. And it really was kind of an interesting start. We had a typical start to the year. I had my inaugural party in January, and it was one of those nights to remember, as they say. And we had our board retreat at the end of January in Austin, and ABA just a couple of weeks later in Austin. And then things started to change. And we have always been a very physical brick and mortar bar. We've got a building called the Below Mansion where we host section and committee meetings. We have over 400 CLEs a year, and we draw lawyers from all over the Dallas community to the Below for those meetings and events and other things. So on March the 12th, the world as we knew it ended. Everything else shut down just within a matter of hours and days. We shut down our Below Mansion. And my first thinking was, well, we're going to reopen on April 1st and everything will be just the way it had been before. It'll be great, and this will just be a blip. After about 3 or 4 days, I realized, this is the real deal, and we're in this for a long time. So the first thing we did was shift from what had been a very brick and mortar virtual, physical bar to a virtual bar. And I cannot credit our staff enough for the work that they put in to become experts in Zoom technology and starting programming within about 10 days of shutting down our building. And the other thing that we did right at the outset, about 4 days after we shut down, was form a coronavirus task force. So our task force, number one, started generating CLEs very rapidly. Number two, we started gathering resources from local, state, and federal authorities. We started dealing with wellness issues that in the early part of the pandemic, it became clear that people sheltering in place was going to be a huge problem from a mental distress and stress standpoint. And at this point, we've now got like a dozen things that we do under our COVID-19, we call it our coronavirus task force. So we've got a dozen categories of things. One of the things we did very quickly, because it was obvious that doctors and nurses and firefighters and EMTs were going to be on the front lines of the coronavirus battle. And we immediately started doing a program for first responders in terms of the wills and estate planning documents and having those available for first responders. Initially, we had a panel of lawyers available to ask questions in a phone bank. We then went to a more virtual platform with links to all the resources on the web. And that has been a huge success. In fact, in July, I got the numbers. We had almost 300 hits on the website for those resources. So obviously a very needed thing and something we were proud to jump up and do. The next thing chronologically was a call from Dean Collins at SMU Law School saying, we've got problems here. Our clerks are losing their opportunities. Firms are retrenching. We've got graduating 3Ls who are having their offers revoked. Huge problem. Reminiscent very much of 2008. And what we did was we formed a committee within about a month. We're calling it the STEER Committee, Stability Tools for Employment and Economic Resilience. And what we've done with that program is we have partnered seasoned lawyers, and we've got more than 20 seasoned lawyers in the program, with not only law students, but also young lawyers who have expressed a concern about their job stability to us. And what we're doing primarily is letting them know, this is awful. I mean, this is 2008 type awful, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. The lawyers who are the seasoned category, they've all seen it before. We've helped direct them to new employment opportunities because for every disaster in one area of the law, there's opportunities created in bankruptcy or employment, or even to some degree oil and gas, which has suffered a huge downturn at the same time as the COVID-19 pandemic hit. So that's been a big success so far. Another area where there's just been a tremendous need from the community, and we're trying to meet it. The third area I want to talk about is, again, but every time you start to think you've got a handle on this, something happens and something unexpected happens. So the next thing that happened was George Floyd. And for me, George Floyd changed everything. I mean, it was one of these things where I didn't come into my year thinking I was going to be focused in on diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging issues, but I decided in the wake of George Floyd and the reaction to George Floyd that that's where my focus needed to be for the rest of my term through December 31. So what we've done is we have formed something we call the Allied Dallas Bars Equality Task Force. And the Allied Dallas Bars part, meaning it's the Dallas Bar plus all of the sister bars. The group of the task force really wanted to be broader than just an anti-racism platform. And so as we speak, we're actually kind of working on our call to action. We've got 52 separate items that we're looking at and trying to decide which of these can the task force do itself, which of these can we do if we partner with somebody in the community, and which of these are probably aspirational for now. They're just they're either too big or there's just too many moving parts to it to put it in place anytime soon. And we are partnering in the community. There's a group called Project Unity in Dallas that has facilitated what we call Together We Dine, which is a program designed to get people together where you eat and you discuss issues of race. And these conversations are frank. They can be candidly uncomfortable, but they're important and you learn. And what we're doing now is we're setting up a new program called Together We Can. And the virtue of Together We Can is not only are we having the Together We Dine gatherings, but we're taking this process into the community and having people engage with those who are not of a like mind and try to build understanding between people with different viewpoints. And I'm not so naive to think we can solve the problems of racism and diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging in the rest of my term through December 31, or even in the years to come, or maybe even in my lifetime. But one thing we've decided is we're going to start and we're going to make a persistent effort and a consistent effort to make a difference. And if, as much as anything else, I hope that becomes our legacy from the events of COVID-19, is that we went out in the community and tried to make a difference and tried to make this country a better place. So with that, I'll turn it back to Michelle and let her cue up Joe.
Robert, thank you. Great ideas, great feedback, certainly some innovative things that we can certainly take back. I've written down lots of notes and have some follow-up questions for you about some of those great ideas you all have developed. We're going to move into some questions at this time, some polling questions that'll come up on your screen. And so we're going to have them pop up, and if you'll be prepared to respond to them, we'll give everybody a moment to transition to those polling questions. Next, we have with us Joe Gross, the president of the Cleveland Bar Association. Joe, like Robert, has been involved in bar leadership for a very long time. And I'm excited to hear from him about the things that Cleveland is doing in adjusting in this transition and our new normal. And so, Joe, without further ado, I'll turn it to you.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and it's a pleasure being here and enjoyed listening to Robert's message, which is going to be similar to what Cleveland is doing. The CMBA's pathway to ensuring we remain indispensable during this COVID crisis has been focused on one core fundamental and three priority areas. The core fundamental area is that innovation is essential. And instead of waiting for the challenges to pass or for the new normal to arrive, we immediately recognized the significant disruption that landed in our laps and embraced it as an opportunity to rethink nearly everything we do through the lens of what do our members need and how can we deliver this in a virtual environment. The first of the three priority areas was building direct access between the bench and the bar. Along with the arrival of COVID came a firestorm of evolving and often inconsistent court pronouncements that left us practitioners confused, overwhelmed, and in some instances, very angry. The CMBA leaned into that opportunity to better connect attorneys directly with the courts by several things. First, we started hosting weekly bench bar task force meetings via Zoom. They brought together more than 40 administrative and presiding judges for our area suburban, county, state, and federal courts, with more than 60 civil and criminal attorneys, both plaintiff and defense side, to talk through the issues with the courts and our cases real time. Two, we created and are maintaining a centralized repository on our website of the individual courts' COVID-related general orders, in addition to delivering a sustained social media campaign with our members and the public every time a new COVID-related general order was issued. And three, late in April, we led a statewide jury trial survey in collaboration with other metropolitan bar associations and a whole host of other stakeholders to collect information from the entire legal industry on when and how individuals thought that jury trials could be resumed across the state of Ohio. We handed that to our Supreme Court Chief Justice. And then four, we launched a pro bono mediation program designed to manage the growing backlog of civil cases that bubbled up as the courts began to return to more normal operations. The second of three priority areas was expanding our role as a conduit for social change, much the same as what Robert was discussing. In the wake of George Floyd's tragic death, both members and non-members flooded our Bar Association to ask one common question: and what can I do to help? And people would see me on the street and they say, what can I do to help? Just give me an avenue. And after hearing our members demand, really, that all of us collectively accept the challenge to be a force for positive, permanent change in our justice system, we invited all of our members and others across the greater Cleveland community to answer the call to join our REAL initiative. That's Racial Equity and the Law. You see our logo on the slide there. Through REAL, the CMBA is leveraging our members and the public to launch a campaign to dismantle legislated and negotiated racism. We're continuing our advocacy for criminal justice reform. We're promoting and growing white allyship. And finally, we're launching, and hope to launch soon, the Cleveland Legal Inclusion 2020 plan, which calls for investing in the recruitment of attorneys of color from outside of the Cleveland area to make the move to a community that not only welcomes, but is actively promoting the development of a more racially inclusive legal community. And the third of the three priority areas is delivering relevant, accurate, and nonpartisan information. In addition to making our website the go-to resource for court orders and other COVID-related developments impacting the legal community, the CMBA jumped headfirst into hosting virtual meetings, webinars, and events. We have now produced more than 200 programs which have drawn tens of thousands of viewers. Programs that weren't on our radar when we closed our doors on March 13th, the vast majority of which have been offered for free. And this has included a host of topics, including law student-related issues, from job hunting in a pandemic to the postponement of the Ohio bar exam and obtaining special practice pending admission licensure. And we got groups together. For example, we took the Black Lives Matter leadership and the Cleveland Police Union leadership, and we discussed the role of civil unrest in fomenting change. And we've supported a case for a statewide criminal sentencing database. Well, that sums it up. Thank you, Michelle. Back to you.
Yeah, that was great. Definitely a different set of activities and offerings than those by Robert and his bar, but similarly excellent topics. We're now going to move to some additional questions, polling questions that we're going to take from the audience. And I'll give you all a quick break to be able to respond to those questions before we move into our roundtable discussion. Robert, Joe, thank you both. I want to start with a question for both of you, actually. Can you tell us, how big are your bar associations?
So in Dallas, we have more than 11,000 members.
Okay. And Robert, a follow-up question to that before I move on to Joe. What does your staff look like at the Dallas Bar Association? What kind of support do you have?
So we have an executive director and about 10 staff under her. So
very good. And Joe, how about the Cleveland Bar? Tell us a little bit about your bar.
Well, our bar is the Bar Association for all of Northeast Ohio. We're about half the size of Dallas, and our staff is probably equal in size.
Great. Robert, one of the things that you mentioned, touched on briefly, was mental health. And I'd be interested in knowing if you have seen specific issues with providing your membership support in the mental health arena, specific to COVID.
We have done that, Michelle, and that was one of the first things that we saw, as I mentioned earlier. Being sheltered in place, there was concerns about domestic abuse, those types of things that are a natural outgrowth of being forced to stay at home. And we started putting on programs virtually immediately from both locally, our Peer Assistance Committee at the Dallas Bar, and also a weekly presentation by the Texas Lawyers Assistant Program, which is through the State Bar of Texas. And it's a terrific program, and we refer people with issues to the TLAP program, as we call it. One of the things that we focused in on initially was just making sure people knew to check in on each other. If there's a problem, let somebody else know. Make sure that resources are available.
Thank you. Joe, one of the things that you mentioned that really struck a chord, and I'm sitting here thinking to myself, why didn't I think of this, is the concept of the pro bono mediations to help with the backlog of the courts. And I'm wondering, how do you manage that? How do you do that? How do you structure it? What kinds of cases are you all seeing? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we have these weekly COVID task force meetings with the courts and the attorneys. And within the group of attorneys, we've had subcommittees. And one of the subcommittees were civil defense and civil plaintiffs. And because criminal trials get priority in a lot of regards, as we civil lawyers know, that made it so that the civil cases got pushed even further back. Our Bar Association is a very active alternative dispute resolution section. So the chair of that section was part of our task force Zoom video every week, and we made the offer, and it was accepted. And so we put out a call for volunteer mediators to help the court out with getting cases assigned and seeing if mediation works. So we have a staff person in our Bar Association that's helping out. And we're working with the courts, and we've got, about 60 cases assigned through that process. Everybody's liking it. Our ADR section feels like it's providing a public service, which is what we as a Bar Association, of course, love.
Definitely. Robert, I'm going to totally switch gears on us for a moment.
Sure.
And I want to talk about race issues. And I want to talk specifically, especially with you being from Texas, there are a lot of issues that have become politically charged, wrongly or rightly. And so the question becomes, as bar presidents and as bar leaders, how do we manage and how do we decide when we get involved in an issue and when we speak on behalf of a bar association?
That's a really layered question, Michelle. And we are a voluntary bar, as I'm sure Cleveland is, and we have to be very careful. And with more than 11,000 members, as you can imagine, I've got people on all sides of every issue. And the way we've decided to tackle it is going in through the task force. And the Equality Task Force is designed basically to say everybody is equal. Everybody needs to be treated the same. So that's the way I've decided to do it. And I'm going to obviously push as hard as I can, because I think this is a really defining moment in our society, and we can't lose the momentum that has started, and we need to get out there and make a difference. So it is a fine line, but I think it's one that we can all advance the cause, and the cause of diversity, equity, belonging, and inclusion, and fighting against systemic racism. That's something I think everybody can be on board with.
Joe, would you like to add something to that?
We've worked very carefully to be the voice of all of our members. When anything that might be sensitive, or we have to take a position on, or we stake our name behind, we have a vast majority concept. So if we don't believe that a vast majority of our members would back us on something, we just choose not to say anything. Or we, more likely, really, we convene. So if we have people on both sides of a matter, we'll bring both sides in and have a civil discourse on it and take it out to the community. And really, the being virtual now makes it easier to do that. We're getting thousands and thousands of views on matters that are really important. And if you watch some of our chat boxes, we got members of the community talking through the Bar Association on matters like racial equality.
Michelle, let me add one point to what Joe said. He touched on something that is so true. But when I get those emails, I call people up and say, here's where we're coming from.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, if you talk it out, they're okay. I mean, and like Joe says, emails are easy to put a spin or a twist or whatever, and it comes out in an unintended way. But when you talk to people on the phone, it really can make a big difference. And so that would be a great piece of advice for all bar association leaders is engage people who are upset. Because most of the time you can bridge the problem, you can solve the problem with discourse.
So, Joe, you spoke a bit about white allyship, and how does that look like within the Cleveland Bar?
First, there's a learning component. And so whites have to learn the Black experience. And one of the ways we're doing it is we're offering through our website, it's the 21-day habit building racial equity program that really came from the San Francisco Bar Association. We called them, and we're basically using that program. So I know I challenged our board membership to all take it, and I think most of them have. Last board meeting, we talked about which day we were on. And so that's very helpful, and that's part of it. But then the next part of being a white ally is to be an ally and start encouraging and start talking about and have some of those uncomfortable situations and take the risk to embolden certain people who haven't been emboldened before, so to speak. And then partnering with our affinity bar associations, including the Norman S. Minor Bar Association, which is an African-American bar association. But we've got other affinity bar associations, and we're working together because we're all behind this.
White allyship is really, I think, a very important part of the entire process. And one of the former bar presidents, Rob Crane, has said, if people of color could have eliminated racism, they would have done that a long time ago. It's going to require the white community to really make the difference here.
Thank you. We're going to lighten the subject just a little bit and go to age issues and dealing with, it's possible to lighten the subject. How do you deal with lawyers who are older and are less comfortable with technology at a time when we're on a high-speed train to a virtual world?
Speaking as one of those older lawyers, you either change or you don't. And we've had all these Zoom CLEs and Zoom discussions and hot talks and other kinds of programs. We're making it as easy as possible, and we're all focused on making it easy. So it's no more difficult than opening up an email or opening up a calendar appointment and hitting a link, and then you're in. From a bar association standpoint, we're not doing anything that that people like me can't handle.
That's exactly right. They all can handle it. Whether they will is up to them. And if there's a higher priority in their lives than learning how to turn on a computer, I can't do anything about that. But most of, I think, our senior members want to stay engaged, and they understand the situation we're in, that they can't drive down to our building and hear a CLE at lunchtime. I think we've gotten pretty good participation from that segment of our bar membership. And I want to do everything I can to encourage it because they're wonderful members.
Good. We hope so. One final question for both of you. This economic downturn, it's been an economic downturn for some people. For other areas of the law, it's been an economic boom. But for those people who are struggling financially, have you seen members who aren't re-upping?
Well, that's a great question, Michelle. So our dues come in at the first quarter of the year. So we really weren't tremendously impacted by COVID because we were kind of at the end of our dues payment cycle. 2021, I know is going to be a challenge, and we are going to have to look at making our membership available cost-wise for those who have a need. And we haven't made any final decisions at this point, but we will need to here in the next couple of months as our membership drive starts.
Joe?
I wish we had a January through December. We have
this
a
year
July.
It worked.
Yeah, so I just became president in July, and we have a July to June bar year. We've had our issue has been some firms have really had to make some tough decisions during this, and so they're looking at membership in the bar association and sponsoring their lawyers in our association a little bit differently. So the bar association did a couple of things to deal with that particular issue. We've asked our firms, the bigger firms, for a sustaining membership, and that's an all-in membership with the discount. And the all-in with the discount includes membership and some hours of CLE that are part of one number. That means one check. That means one time thinking about it, and a deal that can get it passed through their management committees, right? So we've been highlighting the fact that our firms are being sustaining members. And it's sustaining us, really, because if we didn't have things like that, more firms, I believe, might have made the difficult decision to withhold or at least reduce their sponsorship. We're offering bundled packages to individuals so that they can get their membership, maybe some marketing advice. So we're offering some consulting. We have because we're becoming experts in doing these kinds of things, we can help them do their kinds of things, help them with their website, give them leadership training. We have a leadership academy. We've got other sorts of consulting kinds of things. And so that's been successful too. So our membership totals, are about where we have had them, and all of our board members have made 10 calls. So that's 300 calls that we've made, along with the staff been making calls, and haven't had a lot of people say that I can't afford it, but if we did, we would take care of it. And I would say our percentages and getting new members and seeing people fall off are about the same as what they typically are.
Thank you all for your leadership. Thank you for being here today. Robert, Joe, great presentations, good conversation.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you, Joe, Michelle.
I'm going to pass the program over to Russ. Thank you all. Thank you all to the viewers. I've enjoyed being with all of you.